think what really draws them in is that these people exist in our society, and they walk past us in the street, and all of this secret stuff is happening as we live our daily lives.
If a minister running for leadership has been bribed,
will you run Foreign Secretary?
we'd be catastrophically exposed.
The Foreign Secretary is insisting you stand down.
You can't carry on like this.
In a few days, we might have a Russian asset running the country.
I think sometimes when I write stories, I've been a sort of writer for 30 years, which is almost as long as I've been a journalist. They have nothing to do with my journalistic life. But there are other stories, and this is obviously one where the influence is very obvious. And I was literally walking past the MI6 building when I had the idea for this, because it was at the time when in the news we were discussing a lot about Russian collusion and Russian attempts to undermine democracy. And I thought, well, imagine if you were the actual MI6 officer who got the intelligence that one of our leading politicians might be a Russian spy. What would that be like? What would your bosses, how would they react? How would your ultimate boss, the Foreign Secretary, who's one of the suspects in our drama, how would he react? And I just found that was so intriguing as a premise. And then I kind of came up with the character of Kate Henderson, and I fairly quickly gave her kind of tricky teenage children and happy family life that she has to juggle. And it all just felt incredibly real to me. And I wanted to make a drama that was gripping and absorbing and tense and emotional, but that also hopefully people will afterwards say, well, I love watching that. But maybe if they're discussing over their breakfast or at the school drop-off some of the themes behind it, that would make me very happy too, because I think they're important.
Obviously, we had Tom Bradby's book to begin with. So the process of adaptation started, I mean, we read the book, we loved it. Immediately, it felt to me like a fascinating television series. Tom worked with a brilliant co-writer called Gemma Kennedy, and it's always tricky because there are lots of bits to a thriller, to a spy story, and it has to work. So as well as building all those fantastic characters, and in Tom's book, we had a lot of really good characters to play with. But as well as that, you've got a complicated plot, and that plot has to satisfy the audience, and it has to twist and it has to turn, and you have to be believing one thing and then another thing all the way through every episode. So it's a complicated process, but it's a really fun process to be involved in.
I think lots of novelists don't particularly like adapting their own work for reasons that I understand. Perhaps I'm just peculiar, but I really do. And I think that's because, I mean, the short version of that is that it's just kind of magic seeing your characters brought to life, particularly when they're actors as good as we have in this, Rafe and Gemma particularly obviously is the lead, but Rafe, Spall and Roger Allen. I mean, everyone in it is, Mark Stanley's fantastic as the politician. So is Amaka. I mean, everyone in it is really great. So that's kind of a bit of magic that I don't think I'm ever going to get over. When I'm on set and I'm watching it happen, and as a writer on set, you're the only person who doesn't actually have a real job. You've kind of done your work. Everyone else is working really hard and everyone's very polite to you, but you've actually got no reason to be there half the time. But it's just magical watching it happen. So that's the joy in it. Obviously, I wrote the novel, so I'd written the kind of story that was in my head, but then you go on a different journey when you're adapting something, whether as a TV drama or as a film. And in a TV drama particularly, you've got lots more people, commissioners, producers, a co-writer, Gemma in my case, who was brilliant directors. James I'd worked with before and is obviously an Oscar-winning film director who's an absolute privilege and pleasure to work with. So it's a different process, and that is what I love about it. It's a intensely collaborative process, and that's what's cool.
It's a chance I'll have to take.
I've never been asked that question. I mean, there's some climactic scenes that I was looking forward to filming. There's some kind of action scenes that I thought would be fun to witness. There's some emotional scenes that I really was kind of looking forward to seeing how such good actors who really were inhabiting the roles would deliver. There's definitely some scenes I was quite worried about. I think you worry about scenes as a writer more than you look forward to them, because you think, if I really landed this scene, if I landed everything that I need to land. And sometimes there's a scene where you maybe have to get across kind of some plot points, and you always worry a little bit about those. They're going to feel clunky. And of course they don't when you've got really good actors. And watching Gemma deliver some of the stuff was a real pleasure. We started the filming in Malta, and there's an early scene I can't remember when we shot it, like day 3 or 4, where she's got this she's briefing this agent who's going into this villa, which is basically occupied by bigwigs in the Russian intelligence service, and she's going to be bugging them. And it's a tricky scene because Gemma as Kate has to, on the one hand, put some steel in her spine, but also has to be very empathetic. And so it's actually quite a difficult scene to pull off. And I sat in the back of the church that day watching them film the scene. And that's when I think I knew that I was going to feel really proud and feel like we had something special here, because it's so well done. And I think it's an example of how well the actors did at bringing sometimes scenes that could have felt clunky but didn't, because they were so brilliantly done.
You're doing great, Lena. How's my brother? We'll have him moved to the border any day now.
I was gripped by the story. It's extraordinarily sort of twisty, turny, hooky, engaging. And I hope that the viewer will find it as sort of pleasurable experience to watch it as it was to read it. But like Gemma says, it's the sort of depth and the richness and of the characters, which I think is what's universally identifiable, because you put yourself in the character's shoes, I think, as an audience member, which I think is nice. So it's not often you get to see, you know, the sort of quotidian family life of a spy handler, and it, you know, it's about finding those the human beings in stories like this that I think it's the themes that engage and the characters that keep you there, I think, in this sort of thing. So, and I thought that Tom, who wrote it, Tom Bradby, ITV news editor Tom Bradby, has done a really great job in creating really rounded characters as well as a really scintillating, engaging plot.
The spy thriller genre is something that there are a number of different ways of doing, and there's the Bond direction and there's the Le Carré direction, and then there are a few shows that try to get somewhere in the middle, and it's quite hard to hold that space in the middle. And I think this is one of the ones that is trying to do so. So you get the fun of what you might expect with the kind of chases and the sort of Bond element and stuff, but you also get the grounded nature of how government works, or the desire to explore that. And I think that's what was in this for me. And then kind of, you know, expanded into the journey of trying to explore my character.
I love so many things about the spy genre. I moved to Germany when I was 12 years old, and one of my most sort of searing childhood memories was going through Checkpoint Charlie into the East in the days of the Berlin Wall. And shortly after that, I really got into reading like the Le Carrés and the Len Daytons. And I've been inspired by that as a writer my whole life. So I think what I love, well, certainly what we were trying to do here was create something that was a family drama as well as a spy drama and a political drama, and where they were all interwoven together. And that was quite an interesting challenge, but that's the kind of thing I love to watch. And ultimately, we're trying to make something that's really gripping telly. So hopefully we've succeeded.
When I was invited to read Secret Service, the script, I'd read the book already, I was kind of very intrigued and quickly got captivated by the opportunities it offered me as a filmmaker to do some interesting things. But also I think what I was surprised and sort of pleased with is there's a kind of very strong emotional complexity to the characters, and it's character driven. What the characters do, the choices they make drive the story. It's not a kind of plot driven story, it's a character driven story. So everyone makes choices that really create the plot. So again, Tom's writing is all about that, character-based writing, and Gemma is the protagonist of our story. She was attached already to the series when I joined it, and I was thrilled with that idea to work with Gemma, who I thought was really, really great anyway. And so it proved. It was a really good collaboration, and I think she's done an amazing job to make that character three-dimensional. It's not just she's not just a spy, she's a mother, she's a wife, she has vulnerabilities, she has flaws in her family life that you see. So she's a complex character, and that allows Gemma, I think, to really spread into various parts of the emotional life of the character very well.
She was very physically different to me, like quite sort of, you know, flat-footed, you know, always wearing a suit, you know, slouchy. That started me off, the physicality. The poise isn't, she's not that poised, but she is in her own way. And then it was about getting my head around the language, which is very specific and fast and needs to feel like it's coming to you there and then. So I worked a lot on the script before shooting, but also the most helpful thing was meeting a previous MI6 operative that worked for one of the desks. Can't remember if it was Middle East desk or Russia desk. And they just, you know, gave me so many insights on actually the day-to-day life of one of those people and the attributes needed to be in that job, because it's very high risk and you don't get that much glory from it. It's because it's, you know, you can't reveal your identity, you don't get paid hugely for what you're doing, the risks you're taking, but you have to be highly educated, highly, you know, it's very specific. So that was really helpful to me, and I could speak to them about, you know, what happened when you told your kids that you were a spy, and, you know, and they told me all of that, and how it is like to live a double life. And that's a huge thing in this story, is that, you know, they know what each other does for a job, but they both have to keep certain aspects of it private, and that was really interesting to me for to explore. You know, be so transparent in marriages usually, but this one you can't be. And how does that affect marriage?
It's characters that have got secrets, right? And I know that sounds trite, but that's actually a really playable thing, in so much as like you can't show it at all.
It's really satisfying as well to play characters like that, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. That withhold. But going back to what you're saying, I think that they like each other.
Yeah, they do.
And that's a nice thing to play. They like each other. And hopefully that comes across on the screen.
How many times have we told him?
Drives me nuts.
Put it in the dishwasher.
I mean, that's from last night, I think.
Oh. Mum, can't find my football shirt. Have you looked in your wardrobe?
It's not there.
A radical suggestion. Try the dryer.
Spy stories are all about deception. They're about concealing information and revealing information if you're telling a story about them. So I think for a director, it's a genre that allows you to really make interesting camera choices. How you reveal, how you conceal, how you get the actors to perform certain scenes in certain ways. So I think, but I'm like everyone else, I really like the world of espionage and spying generally. And as a genre, I think it's about secrets and what we can't know and what we're trying to find out, often with a protagonist in our story that's trying to find out what's really going on here. And we sort of enter into that worldview via the protagonist, which is how our story unfolds through Gemma's character. So Gemma is our sort of eyes on the world that she's in, and what she doesn't know, we don't know either. You know, so it has that kind of nice tension that we're with her and her point of view a lot of the time.
Why do you always lock everything away? So long as you're not dealing drugs.
How do you think I bought our massive mansion?
My approach to acting is always the same. It's to invite the actor to offer something. In other words, you don't want to tell them what to do or where to move or where to go or how to say it. You want to say, you've thought about this, you know, you've learnt your lines, you've thought about what you want to do. Let's start with that and see how that works out. So both Gemma and Rafe had thought a lot about their characters and how to play them. So I just let them go. And that's the great joy of casting the actors we cast, is they have initiative, they have ideas, and you want to let them express those ideas. They're more thought out than yours are because they've thought about the character. And so both Rafe and Gemma were firstly very easy to work with because they came full of ideas. And secondly, maybe that should be the first thing I said, they're both great actors. So if you do want to adjust something, they do it really, really well. And I think what they did together was so interesting. We did a few rehearsals in a family context to kind of get the family world lived in and familiar to the actors. And almost immediately when Gemma and Rafe were rehearsing, you thought, oh, this is going to be great, because they had a connection as actors and as people together. And they sort of helped each other a bit, I think, too. And what goes on in that family is very interesting and becomes ultimately part of our story and has a big impact on the kind of other levels of our story, the politics and the espionage of our story. So that relationship is crucial. It's the emotional heart of the story, essentially. And they both played it as if they'd been living together for the last 20 years, you know. So that in that respect, it was a joy. And I just enjoyed every sort of day we'd show up and you'd know that they'd be doing something interesting. And that's what you want from actors, just show me something interesting that you're going to do. But they both did it, well, time and again, they surprised me and delighted me. And I think also, as an ensemble, the cast worked very well together. It wasn't just Gemma and Rafe were at the heart of it, but Gemma has interesting relationships with people at work, particularly her colleague, played by Avi Nash. That's a very interesting sort of marriage in its own way too, a professional marriage, and you see how that works out, and the friction between them and the kind of understanding between them. So I would say that one of the great joys of the show for me was the ensemble cast we assembled, and every actor just brought their best game to this. And Roger Allen plays the head of MI6, has an immediate kind of gravitas to him and a kind of complexity that he does with the most minimal gestures. I'd worked with Roger on something else, and I was so thrilled when he said yes, because Roger again just shows up and he's just there. So across the board, the ensemble was fantastic for me as a filmmaker.
Well, you can only be as good as the person who's you're acting opposite, and I'm really of the belief that when you watch acting, it's the energy that is created between two actors rather than an individual actor, which is what's exciting to watch. And you just hope that you can act with someone as open as Gemma, and I was lucky enough to do that. Long been an admirer of Gemma's work, so it was great to, you know, do those scenes and because as she was saying, my character is a special advisor to the Home Secretary, and obviously Gemma is a spy handler, and so they've got these sort of exciting jobs, but they also have a nice relationship.
Yeah, I think that's really important actually, that there's this connection. They've been together forever, since uni days. Mm-hmm. They have this sort of naturalness between them and a sense of humour, which we don't, I think your character is just, you know, he is a humorous person, but Kate can be a little bit at work very different. So it's nice that we see the real Kate when she's at home with him and the kids. And actually that they're kind of not doing that well in terms of their kids and being able to kind of communicate with their teenage kids and manage all of that. They're really, really high achieving people professionally, but in the marriage and day-to-day life, it kind of things slide. So it was nice because we had such a natural rapport, I think we could just let that be. And also I think it was important for me that even though she doesn't tell him what's going on, he's her rock. So you feel that there's this support from him from the off, that there's this unspoken support for her and that she can rely on him. And I think that came across really easily.
I'm sorry, Kate, but I think it's a classic Moscow play.
There's no evidence they know we've got ears in the villa. We spent 8 months setting this up. Our security was bulletproof.
I believe you, but Russia's dangled hooks like this to every agency in the West.
I'm just trying to follow the facts, Zach.
Which might actually be misinformation.
My character's name is Zach Hussein. That was not his original name. I think his original name was Richard. And we went on a journey when I was cast to discover what it would mean for someone of my background, an Arab background, and Egyptian by birth, both parents, although Scottish born, as you can tell. And so, you know, I'm 45. He will be someone who will have lived through 9/11 and been through that world. And so what does it mean to have my background and have been in MI6 over these last 25 years or so, 20 years, and also and then become head of Europe, which is one of the top roles within MI6. So there was quite a lot of shaping that went on in that regard in terms of understanding how to make those aspects resonant. And then also the kind of dynamic with Gemma's character, Kate, how to... they're in two different positions, and that creates points of tension. And there are ways in which that can be explored, or, you know, in a way that can just be sort of getting in the way of what someone is trying to do. And then there are ways of doing that which mean that they are both acting with principles that mean something, that put them in a structural state of tension, which is both exciting for the drama, but also exciting in terms of what it's trying to be about. And it was about exploring those elements of things, which was fun.
Amazing. I really love that you got to take that character that was originally written and step back and make it work for you. How often have you had that experience, really getting to
well, the good truth and the sad truth is always, you know, there's very often a journey that that I go through with characters, especially if there's a cultural sensitivity there with my Arab background, in the various roles and contexts that I've played in. The good thing about that, both in terms of the projects that I've done and the films, you know, is that that's generally been welcome. You get to push things into territories that that are interesting culturally, as well as for the story that you're trying to tell. As far as I'm aware, there is no one currently in the Secret Service who is head of Europe or of that kind of standing, who is of my background. And of course, there are reasons for that. Maybe there will be. And it's interesting to explore that in the case of a drama. And what also it reveals about British culture and about our history and where we might want to go and what questions are relevant to the world we're living in now.
If he rumbles your agent,
He won't, and the potential intelligence outweighs the risk.
it'd better be worth it.
There's some stuff in the end result of the show that I don't think I could possibly have expected. So the influences that are obvious, Le Carré, Len Deighton, all the great spy authors I grew up with, I mean, that influence is pretty obvious in the show. I felt very inspired by them then. I feel very inspired by them now. Obviously, I'm not going to get anywhere near the top people in the genre, but nothing wrong with aspiring to it and admiring their work, and I really do. So there's a lot that you might have been actively going for. There's some stuff that I don't know where I necessarily would point to for inspiration, but we really wanted to make a personal and a family drama and to make that in a way the heart of it, and so that you go from that into the spying and the political genre, and therefore as the audience you're really rooting for these characters. I don't know, maybe that felt like that hadn't been done that often, so that felt kind of fresh. And then there's some stuff that you have no real right to expect, but like we had an Oscar-winning film director, and that's a pretty amazing thing to have, and it looks bloody amazing. I mean, you know, that I can say that because there's nothing whatsoever to do with me. But James, you know, he really, you know, he had his DOP. Ulla is just an incredible director of photography, and it looks $1 gazillion. And I don't think I ever expected that it would look as cinematic as it does.
With my cinematographer, we watched certain films together to understand how things are done in the genre. Not that we didn't know, but we wanted to kind of sharpen our refinement. I watched a film called The Parallax View, an Alan J. Pakula film that's very interesting the way it's shot. I watched All the President's Men, which is a classic sort of spy, espionage kind of drama. So those were kind of reference points. I also like looking at photography, particularly black and white photography, to understand compositional elements. In a spy show, as I was saying, you have to occlude things and reveal things, often in a shot. So I often look at black and white photography, not espionage, there's not such a thing as espionage photography, but mostly it comes through talking with your cinematographer and your actors, how you're going to approach stylistically something. You have ideas, but they're refined at the point of shooting. So your reference points are quickly, I think, forgotten. They evaporate as you begin to own the material yourself.
Igor and Kirill Markov hook you in and plant the idea they've got a spy at the top of the British political system. We spend the next 10 years chasing a ghost.
Or it's true and we've just got wind of it.
The other thing that drew us to the book was that this is an interesting time to be making this series, because it's sort of, obviously it's a thriller, it's got spies, it's got politics, it's got all that juicy stuff in it, but it is also, at its very core, it's about the importance of democracy. And in a way, when we read the book, we were all drawn to the idea that wouldn't it be interesting if people started a proper dialogue, a conversation about this and how important it is, just when it seems to be under threat in so many places.
There is something that is very possible inside the spy thriller genre when it has a political edge that can be really interesting about our world, while at the same time being fun to watch. You know, there's always like an advantage that films or TV shows about spy thriller political worlds tend to have, which is that there's a hunt. And the hunt tends to make for a really good plot. So you're hooked, but then you also get to explore other stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this. I haven't seen it yet.